Welcome to Attic Raiders Retro Reviews, where today I'm taking a look at Warriors of Athena Quests, which is released here in the UK on February the 26th by Osprey Games. Written by Joseph McCullough and illustrated by Hazem Amin, Warriors of Athena is a solo and cooperative wargame set in a fantasy version of ancient Greece. This is the second of the two Warriors of Athena books that are being released at the same time, with heroes containing all of the rules, loot and information to build a warband, and quests containing the campaigns and the scenes. So if you've not watched my previous review of Heroes, which can be found right here, then stop right now and go and watch that before coming back here. That way everything will make a lot more sense. Go on, I'll wait. Right, let's begin then. First off, as an actual book, Quests is the same great quality as Heroes. It's the same glossy hardcover. It's got a nice weight and feel to it. It's full colour throughout. You can see that the pages here have all got this really nice kind of subtle marble texture to them. And there are lots and lots of photographs scattered through the whole book. I think it's worth noting that these photos are all brand new with no duplication of any of the photos which are featured in the Heroes book, so that's really nice. Not all of the creatures seen in the photos, however, actually feature in the quests here though, so don't rush out and buy miniatures based solely on the photos. Hazem Amin's artwork continues to be bold, energetic and give a sense of the epic, and I have to say, having spent more time with it this last week, the style is really growing on me. One thing to note though, now that I've read all of the campaigns, is that Amin's work is obviously based on famous Greek myths and legends, and while some of them illustrate scenes from the campaigns exactly, not everything drawn in the two books features in the scenarios or the bestiary. For example, Charon here and the river Styx don't feature in any playable format. The writing in here is well laid out, it's clearly written, easy to follow, and it never feels too dense. I found 11 errors in punctuation, spelling or typing, but they're all tiny things like if that's all of you've got. Most people are not going to care or notice these things, but I'm a primary school teacher and I'm afraid proofreading other people's writing is something that I do on a daily basis. The book is broken down into four main sections: the introduction and guidance on how to play, the campaigns, which obviously make up the bulk of the book. You can see from here to here, this is all the campaigns in here. A chapter on designing your own quests, and the bestiary, which contains the stats and abilities of all of the monsters you will or may face. The main new thing that Warriors of Athena contains that is different, its unique selling point that sets it apart from the likes of Frostgrave and Joseph's previous game books, is the use of an oracle and what are being called scenes. Essentially, this is Dungeons and Dragons Light, where the oracle acts out the role of the dungeon master or game master and introduces roleplay elements into sections of the campaign that happen between the tabletop scenarios. The oracle has a role within the tabletop scenarios as well, taking control of the actions of the monsters and opponents instead of allowing them to simply follow a scripted AI, and even choosing which events are triggered at the end of each turn rather than them being selected by random card draw. But it's the scenes between pushing around miniatures that the oracle really comes into their own. Essentially, an oracle will read a narrative description of where the warriors are and what they can see or otherwise sense, and then open up the floor to the other players, allowing them to interact with their environment or the people they come across by asking questions or stating what they would like to do or check out. This is all played out in the theatre of the mind, with players encouraged to think like their hero, with the oracle responding to players, answering their questions, acting as NPCs to give clues about upcoming scenarios, or rewarding players' initiative or interactions with XP. So for example, if an oracle was to describe a scene where players come across a lamb trapped down a cleft in the rocky earth, players would be free to decide what they want to do about it. They might ignore it completely and carry on with their journey, and this might mean that they start their next scenario a few inches further in from the player edge, or they might decide to rescue it, in which case a player might describe searching for a safe path to climb down. The oracle may then ask them to make a perception roll to spot handholds in the rock face, and if successful, grant them a plus to an athletics roll to climb down without falling. Players might describe using a rope wrapped around a tree in a pulley system to help hoist out the lamb, so the oracle might lower the target number needed for a strength roll to pull it up, and things like that. Once they have the lamb, players might decide to eat it, eliminating the effects of hunger they might be suffering from, or they might decide to keep it and eventually come across a shepherd, played by the oracle, who rewards their help with an item. Scenes written in the campaigns are all detailed and give the most likely actions that players will take and how much XP should be awarded for each action at the end of the scene. But anyone who's run a roleplay campaign before will know that players have a habit of pulling off the wall stunts at times and going extremely off script. So oracles will have to be good at thinking fast and improvising. Of course, you don't need an oracle at all to play Warriors of Athena. The scenarios and campaigns can easily be played just as a straight up solo or co-op wargame. However, the books have been written to use an oracle, and I'd highly advise that you do if you possibly can. So if you decide not to use one, you're going to miss out on a lot of the content. The quests themselves are broken down into 4 campaigns. Now, as you can see, all of these are the quests here. And each of the 4 campaigns is a mixture of scenes and scenarios, each one getting progressively longer, more complex and harder in order to keep up with the ever-improving stats and abilities of your warband. Starting with the first campaign, which features 2 beginner level scenarios and 2 simple scenes, they gradually build to 5 scenarios and 4 scenes by the 4th campaign. In total, the 4 quests contain 14 scenarios and 11 oracle-led scenes. So if you're not using an oracle, you're going to miss out on 44% of the gaming content contained in the quests. 14 scenarios is still a hefty chunk of gaming though. It is less than the 20 scenarios in the 2nd edition of Frostgrave, but it's more than the 10 scenarios contained in the Stargrave core book. Now, the oracle system makes it tricky for me to give a full in-depth review of the book, which is why you will have noticed that I'm only showing the first couple of pages here. While I would love to share with you all of the scenarios and creatures they contain, the whole oracle system is set up in order to deliver a slowly unfolding story that comes with mystery and surprise. Players are supposed to not know what they're going to face before they face it, so that they can work in the scenes in order to gain clues. If I tell you now what you're going to be up against when and what they're capable of, it's going to spoil the roleplay aspect, which is almost half of the content here. But I'm also aware that people want to know what to start preparing for their games in terms of models and miniatures. So if you plan on playing with an oracle, and I advise that you do in order to get your money's worth, and you want to know nothing about what you'll face, then stop watching now, leave a comment below, and thanks for joining us. Are you still here? Well, okay, don't say that you weren't warned. There will be some spoilers ahead, but I'm going to keep it a lot under wraps because I'm only going to be looking at parts of the first campaign and creatures from the Bestiary that are in the first campaign or have already been made public by North Star on their Facebook page, or Joseph himself on the official Warriors of Athena Facebook group, which you should definitely join. Okay, here we go. The first and simplest campaign is the Golden Hives, and it features 3 Cyclops beekeepers that the warriors are going to have to slay in Athena's name. The first thing to note is that each campaign or quest includes a full list of the miniatures needed for it right at the start, which is fantastic and something that people have been requesting for quite a while. So you'll know exactly what you're going to need to get prepared beforehand without hunting through each of the scenarios for mention of the creatures. And these miniature lists are pretty accurate. I will say that there is one quest that uses giant spiders but doesn't name them in the list of miniatures needed at the beginning, and that there's another quest that lists a miniature of the goddess Athena as needed but doesn't actually have her in any of the scenarios in it. But apart from those 2, everything else here is correct. Joseph's games have a habit of using large numbers of the same creature in scenarios, and Warriors of Athena is no different. As you can see, the quest is going to need at least 8 giant bees. It's listed as 8+ because that's the minimum number you're going to start with on the table at setup, with even more turning up through events triggered at the end of each round. Now, in a worst case scenario, assuming you drew all bee related event cards and that you don't manage to kill any of them before they all make it to the table, you're going to need 15 giant bees here, which is a lot of bees and one of the potential weaknesses here. Now, obviously you're free to represent the bees however you want, including paper cutouts, but most people will probably want to have actual miniatures of each creature. And while gamers could easily find a use for a single giant bee in lots of other games, once I've used my 8+ bees in the scenario in which they're going to be used in, will I really be able to use all of them for any other game? And do I really have space for 15 copies of a fairly obscure creature that's not going to get much further use? It can be a bit of a predicament. We know that North Star are producing giant bees, but there's no word on whether they will be plastic or metal yet, and I suspect that if they're metal, then the price is quickly going to mount up with the number that you're going to need. And while plastic bees can be found in cheap bags of toy insects, I'm yet to find a bag that has just bees without them looking super cutesy. While we're talking about miniatures that you'll need large numbers of, for later quests you're also going to need at least 6 dog-sized crabs, at least 8 walking corpses or zombies, at least 7 centaurs split between fighters and archers, at least 12 satyrs split between fighters and archers, and at least 16 skeletons split between fighters and archers. Now, while these are large numbers of each creature type, gamers are far more likely to already have miniatures of zombies, skeletons or beastmen in their collection, or be able to use them for other games once they've been used here. They're far more common. Large numbers of centaurs might be a tricky find at an affordable price right now, but North Star have already confirmed that they're going to release a plastic box set of centaurs for Warriors of Athena. Wargames Atlantic sells satyr brutes, which could be used, but North Star have also confirmed a release of satyrs for Warriors of Athena, though it's not currently known if these will be plastic or metal. Given the number needed here though, I really hope and suspect that there's going to be a plastic box set. The second thing that's of obvious note is that scenario setups now feature full colour maps. This is something that numerous players, including myself in previous Stargrave reviews, have called for to be included in Joseph's games in order to help clarify table layout, without having to rely solely on text descriptions. I believe Stargrave Death Vector was the first to introduce setup diagrams, a whole 2 of them, but here every scenario has a map. Drawn by illustrator Rosio Espin-Pinar, they look beautiful and really help with getting things ready. Though it should be noted that the maps will still have to be used in conjunction with careful reading of the text descriptions, as they don't contain all of the items needed during setup. For instance, this scenario map shows the placement of the giant bees, but it doesn't show the location of the 3 clue markers needed, whereas other maps in later scenarios do show the locations of the clue markers, but they don't show the location of all the creatures. Still, the maps are a fantastic addition and hopefully one that will be continued into Joseph's other games. Speaking of clue markers, most scenarios use 4 or less clue markers, but one scenario does call for 8 of them to be placed. As they could be the location of anything from a treasure to a creature, I'm planning on making these quite abstract for my games. Treasure markers only ever start with a maximum of 1 on the table, with perhaps 1 or 2 being revealed by clue markers, so you won't need to model very many of those. Food markers hardly appear at all, with only 2 needed in any scenario if you're going to want to model them. It's a bit of a shame really, as the hunger and thirst rules for heroes were one of my favourite additions to the game when I reviewed the first book last week, but now that I've read all of the quests, they don't actually get used in any of them. I'm sure that they will feature in subsequent expansions, but it's a bit of a pity to introduce something and then not use it. There's a good variety to the quests and scenarios on offer here, taking place in lots of different locations with lots of variety to the setups and special rules. Modelers will probably be glad to know, however, that there's actually not a lot of different types of terrain pieces needed. Rocks, trees, bushes and lots of small scatter terrain ruins are all that's required for the majority of the scenarios. But if you want to get building, you will need 3 damaged 5x5 inch palace buildings, which each feature a door in one side, 4 or 5 small damaged farm buildings. You could potentially reuse the palace buildings if you don't make them look too specific, and 3 stone roundhouses. So getting hold of the needed terrain is definitely all very doable from a practical perspective. The next chapter, moving past all of the quests, is lots of advice for oracles to create their own scenarios and scenes, covering everything from what should be in an event table to what strengths of creatures should be faced and what level of rewards should be granted for different actions. It's very similar to the kind of advice that was given in Frostgrave Perilous Dark on game design, and gives a great insight into Joseph's thought process. And then finally, the book finishes with the bestiary and the creature traits. The bestiary is broken down into animals, uncivilized races, undead, gods and goddesses, and monsters. Now, I've already spoken quite a lot about some of the creatures that are included in here and the numbers of them that you'll need, and I don't want to give too much more away, so I'm not going to go through everything contained in here, I'm afraid. What I will say is that there are 53 different creature stat blocks, with quite a lot of them being normal versions and giant versions, or fighter and archer versions of the same creature, but only 25 of the 53 are actually used in the scenarios in this book. So just over half of what's in here is there for oracles to use in quests of their own design, or hopefully in subsequent expansions. Now, I say that because some of the creatures that are listed but not used, like Medusa the Gorgon, some of the most famous from Greek myth, and have been given the most interesting in-game abilities. And of course, Greek legends include a lot of different creatures, and it just wouldn't have been possible to include them all in this volume. So there are things like the Manticore and the Chimera that just didn't make it to the Bestiary, which I'm sure some people will be disappointed about, but I'm pretty sure that they'll show up in a future expansion. if things go well with sales. And that's everything I'm able to share with you at the moment. I hope it's been enough to help you to make an informed decision about whether or not Warriors of Athena is for you. If you're a fan of Joseph's other games, which I am, then this is very much more of the same and you're going to enjoy it. If you're looking for something completely new and different, then maybe this isn't the one for you. Personally, I love D&D and roleplay, so the extra Oracle elements are right up my street. I really hope to be able to play that way with a few other people. But if you're just going for solo play, again, this may not be the best value for you. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen here today and that it's been useful. If it has, please give the video a like and consider subscribing. I'd really be interested to hear your views in the comments down below. Is it a yay or a nay for you? And why? I'll be back with more wargaming and vintage board games next time, so until then, this is Attic Raiders Retro Reviews.